colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I would like to welcome you on today's webinar, officially titled Engage with European Researchers Outside Europe, Connecting with Scientific Diasporas in Latin America, North America, and China. The webinar is organized by Talent Circulation Community of Practice in cooperation with EURAXESS Worldwide. The aim of today's webinar is to explore a vital role that scientific diasporas play in fostering international cooperation and talent outreach beyond Europe. You will hear valuable insights from our esteemed speakers representing EURAXESS Worldwide. They will highlight successful strategies for engaging with diaspora networks in Latin America, North America, and China. Before giving floor to our distinguished presenters, let me say a few words about this community of practice. As you might know that under ERA Talent Project, 6 communities of practice have been established as platforms where members exchange best practices, expertise, and know-how on specific topics. The Brain or Talent Circulation Community of Practice has 8 members with participation of EURAXESS Worldwide. And our community of practice intends to exchange expertise and knowledge on the topic of welcoming, attracting, reintegrating, and retaining research talents in countries that belong to European research area. And the exchange of expertise and best practice sharing concentrates on the following topics, such as talent circulation strategies or institutional arrangements and collaborations that support these strategies, as well as activities that address alumni researchers and research diaspora, to which this webinar itself is related to. We also aim to identify various funding tools that support talent circulation, as well as services that support reintegration of returning researchers. Or last but not least, this knowledge exchange is related to identification of specific legislative tools and policies that support return or attraction of talents. With this respect, I would also like to mention that under Talent Circulation Community of Practice, we are working on the development of a specific platform, talent circulation platform for institutions, that will be launched until the end of this year, and that aims to elaborate on these topics with intention to direct the information specifically to the institutions.
I'd like to start, although the Latin American hub is probably the one of us that started later working with the diaspora, but I will show you what we did. Our activities with the European scientific diaspora was focused on Brazil. So I think you can see my screen. This is the logo of the Association of European Researchers in Brazil. This is due to the fact that we started our activities in Brazil in 2013, and most of our mailing list when we decided to work with diaspora was from Brazil instead of Latin America. That's why we decided to focus our activities on the European researchers based in the country. And at that time, we worked a little bit with Top 4, which are the colleagues from Europe, right? To start identifying the European researchers in the country, their needs, and how we could work with them. So at that time, the situation was that there was only one national association of Italian scientists at that time, but it was not active. And we did a mapping of the European researchers that we could identify here. We asked them to register and show their interest. And when at the beginning we gathered around 200 researchers, and we saw that we didn't have a quorum big enough from national researchers, except maybe for the Italians, to build individual associations of diasporas. That's why we decided to go for the Association of European Researchers, putting all of them together in the same association. And you were saying that we would report on our successes, but I will also report on the difficulties that we had. So this probably was a mistake somehow to work with the European researchers, because if you have an association of European researchers, then the national embassies don't feel like they own the association, and it's more difficult to get them support the association, fund the association, or at least get involved, you know, because people from the capitals, they want to work with their own researchers, and sometimes it's not so clear for them why they should work with other European diaspora, you know? So anyhow, this is how we went. And we had another difficulty in Brazil is that we identified almost half of our database was made of European researchers, European born and educated, but almost the other half was made of binationals, meaning Brazilian researchers who hold a passport, a European passport, and they were not educated in Europe. So they are not exactly a diaspora, you know, because they didn't come from Europe to Brazil. And as a consequence, they don't have the same expectations for the association, they don't have the same needs, and they don't want to put the same content into the association. So this is one of the difficulties also, but it's also a strength somehow, because we are more diverse and complementary, etc. But this is something that has to be taken into consideration when someone wants to work with European diaspora, and how far you go when you want to gather those European researchers. So the association was somehow created anyhow at the end of 2022, but it was an informal creation in the sense that it has no legal representation, you know, in Brazil, but it didn't prevent the researchers to work very successfully. They organized a series of activities, mostly to present the Brazilian system to their peers that are interested in coming to Brazil or collaborating with Brazil, and also sharing experiences among them with everything that has to do with applying to European grants. So you have to consider when a European researcher is based in a Brazilian institution, when they are recruited as professors in universities, they are somehow considered as national, as local Brazilian researchers, and the same rules apply to them when they want to participate in Horizon Europe or in any national call. So this is what they did. They tried to share experiences to increase the collaboration with Europe, because this is one of the objectives of the association. Let me see what else I wanted to tell you. EURAXESS, I'm always saying we when we refer to the association. This is because actually EURAXESS and in Brazil is doing the secretariat of the association. And this is one of the difficulty also, because we had people interested. I can hear a microphone open. Do I need to stop already? No?
No, I just muted one of our attendees. You can go ahead.
Okay, so EURAXESS and myself, actually, I'm doing a lot to keep this association alive, because we have good researchers, very motivated, but they also have a lot of things to do. And sometimes I have the feeling that if we were not here to take it, to hold it with our hands, probably the association would dissolute somehow. So this is something that takes a lot of time and effort. And nevertheless, we did the first physical event 1 month ago in Sao Paulo that gathers most of the researchers in the country. And it was a very good success. We had new faces also, and it was decided to create the association legally, because until now we were functioning on an unofficial basis with no legal existence. So the researchers showed interest in creating the association under the Brazilian law. And this is tricky because it has consequences financially. You have to pay for an accountant, you have to pay for legal help, and who is going to pay? As I was telling you, it's not easy for the national science counselors to support the EU association. The European Commission and the European delegation doesn't have dedicated funds to support the association so far, or at least I'm not aware of them. And so until now, EURAXESS has been funding all the activities, but what's next? So the idea was to ask one of the Brazilian funding state organization if they wanted to support and the creation of the association as part of their activities. And one of them found it a good idea because they are themselves working with their own diaspora, the Brazilian researchers in Europe and worldwide, and they see it as a way to collaborate and increase collaboration with Europe, because we will match, or we will marry those demands, right? And those researchers speak the same language in the sense that they both have a very good knowledge of Europe and of Brazil, and they can collaborate very efficiently. So this is where we are now. We are going to try to legalize the association and somehow get out a little bit of it. If I would manage to keep an eye on it and participate in the activities, it would be wonderful, but not doing an everyday work to incentivize, to support them. I would be very happy to step back a little bit. Something else, I know that you are here from Europe because you are interested in working with the European researchers and in your diaspora in Brazil and Latin America. And I did this map to show that I was surprised to notice that several of the Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects are actually led by European researchers based in Brazilian institutions. This diaspora that we are talking about, they are working in Brazilian institutions, but they came with the knowledge of Horizon, they already have partners. And so it makes it easier for them to go into European projects. And so I listed let me see, 9 projects, right? 8 projects here that are led by those European researchers. So this is a very good point, in my opinion, to show that, yes, it's useful that you work with your diaspora. But in my opinion, and I think it's also one of the topics of the discussion, how could you do that? It's not so easy, because I can tell you, European colleagues, yes, contact them whenever your researchers are interested in going into a Horizon project, for example, or contact the association whenever you have a call. But we know that you won't be able to do that on the long term, because we already ask you to feed us as EURAXESS Worldwide, and we see that it's very difficult for you to send us every time to send us information every time you want to collaborate with researchers from our worldwide countries. So in my opinion, what has to be done is that you lobby with your national institutions to have them work with the diaspora and consolidate national networks, or why not a European network, but supported by the European Commission and funded. So some of the national countries do it very well. The Spaniards do it very well. They have association of diaspora researchers everywhere in the world. They fund them very generously. They have grants for mobility, and it makes it work very well. So I think this is the solution. Either national association supported by the capitals or by the European Commission. Why not having a CSA, a coordination and support action, so we could all work together with the diasporas? I think this is the way forward. But we will discuss it in the second step, I guess. So thank you very much for your attention, and I give you back the floor.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your interesting presentation. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Jackson Howard, who is representative of EURAXESS North America, responsible for the United States and Canada. Jackson, feel free to begin.
Daniela. And thank you to my predecessor and successor in terms of speaking, my colleagues who will speak. I think this is really interesting how you can compare and contrast 3 of the 9 hubs, because you can really see how maybe as individuals and as teams, we all have slightly different approaches or thoughts, but at the same time, the realities on the ground, as a few of us were discussing earlier, really is different. And that also explains why some of us feel certain strategies would or wouldn't work in one another's countries and continents. I've shared in the chat, I'm not going to change my approach. You're all EURAXESS representatives, but I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe just like I do to the public. So I've shared in the chat all of our social media channels, and of course our flash note emails, which I don't know the degree to which you may have email blasts on the European side, but most of us in the worldwide side of the project also have twice a month email blasts with news, funding opportunities. Please think of us as an extension of your own work. I don't know the importance that you put on recruitment or attracting international talent to your countries and your institutions, but I would say we're hungry for more content and more opportunities to promote specific positions within Europe. So please think of us. I'm constantly sort of trawling the extranet and other national government resources for this, so we can sort of make both of our lives easier. If you just ping us and say, hey, can you guys share this, please? I know in North America or all of the worldwide continents, this opportunity may be of interest, and we'll be really happy to. Danielle, I'm going to ask you when I have a minute or 2 left, maybe just to let me know, and I can start wrapping up. I think I can really fit my time here. So let me just share my screen. And I will approach and talk a little bit about what we do, but I think primarily I just want to explain the landscape. And then from there in the Q&A or the discussion phase, we can go more in depth. So again, thank you for having me today. I'm joining you from Washington, D.C. I think we're typically 6 hours behind Central Europe time. So we definitely have my mornings, your afternoons, where we can overlap and be in touch. So in North America, it's maybe we have some similarities and some differences to China, as you will hear, and Brazil and Latin America as a whole, as you have heard. Firstly, we are the longest standing hub. So I think we maybe have more of a tradition. We have more time built in, and Charlotte's colleague is actually our predecessor. So we inherited a very good relationship with a lot of diaspora networks. We didn't have to build it from scratch when my colleague Derry and I joined in 2020. So I think we really hit the ground running in that sense, is the new team of 2. Because the presence of diasporas is large, and because it's also, for the most part, volunteer positions, we find it's very hard to engage them because they have their day jobs. They're all, particularly those in the Washington, D.C. area where we are, they're all quite prestigious in their career growth. So in 2021, for example, we had quarterly meetings because everything transitioned to Zoom and online activities. And we thought this is going to be great because we have annual meetings with the diaspora networks that were in person. They've since returned to being in person. And this is where we can have them, not unlike we're doing now, share their challenges, successes, give tips and tricks, support one another. And we found that we were new to the job in 2020, and COVID really put a damper in the in-person activities. We needed to know what they were up to. We couldn't just follow their blogs and their emails and really get a sense. It took that communication. So we had quarterly meetings online. This was very successful to us as newcomers, but we found that it's really hard to get people to commit. And even if we have a date and a time agreed in advance, within 48 hours beforehand, people's work lives and personal lives have small changes here and there. So I would consider that a moderate success in terms of getting us acclimated to them, having them connect to us. I don't know what the landscape is like in other continents, but I would say in North America, what we find is a lot of people will join as a board member or just a volunteer for the Diaspora Network. They'll be there for a few years and then they'll leave on good terms, of course, but it's a lot like diplomacy. The diplomats that will come to a foreign country, represent their country at their embassy or their consulate, and then they go back to their home country. So in this case, it's a constant game of being in touch and making sure that both sides are aware of what we're up to. We share whatever funding and mobility opportunities that these networks share with us. For those that are not in close contact, we also just are keeping an eye on what they're posting publicly, and we'll sort of compile that and share it. But there's no one size fits all approach because these groups really vary in their formality and their size. So I want to just underscore what Charlotte said about the Spanish network. So for example, firstly, the Spanish government provides some really great support. I should just give the example that in the US and Canada alike, the Spanish embassy in both capitals, the Spanish consulates in the major city, and the Spanish cultural centers will oftentimes give their venue or their space in kind. So this is something that for us as EURAXESS, unless we really negotiated some sort of great overlapping joint event, it might cost us 1,000 or 2,000 euros just for the space and or the catering. The Spanish network in the US is called ACUSA. The Spanish network, they get this basically as a donation to themselves from the Spanish government to them as a government-supported entity. So we point to them as an example of what other countries can do, whether we're talking to the diaspora networks or the home countries and their governments. But then you get the other end of the spectrum where, for example, we have the Swedish network before my colleague and I joined in 2020 in Victoria, who's now based in Colombia. In her last year based in North America, she launched the Swedish network. To this day, 5 years in, the Swedish network basically meets on Zoom every 2 or 3 months for a fika, for a sort of Scandinavian coffee where they chat about job opportunities in the country, tips and tricks for applying. For those that want to remain in the US and Canada, talk about career tips also. But it's really just a place to share camaraderie. To my knowledge, there's never been any in-person activities or anything like that. But there's no cost to this. Basically, the researcher that found it and led it uses her university's Zoom license and other sort of expensive licenses to support the cause. I think at one time she ran a Basecamp online bulletin board where she would offer a lot of posts, basically like a very in-depth forum. So I think it's a matter of if the low-level individuals can leverage whatever they might have access to in their personal careers or academic lives, provide those sort of support tools, those digital tools in kind. And then the Swedish network really leans into us because they know my colleague and I are paid during business hours to do our job. So while she's a bit limited, she said, hey, can you share this event we're hosting? And can you maybe contact so-and-so and see if they might want to be a speaker for our event? And that also allows us to check the box and say that we're supporting European research, mobility and awareness of European funding. So really, this is a matter of two sides coming together and finding common goals. In the US and Canada, I also just want to say that a lot of the diaspora members are highly integrated culturally in society. So you may find, I'm always curious to hear about the other continents. Perhaps there's less of an appetite to say, oh, unless they're first generation, oh, I am Italian American. I really want to dig deep and become a part of the Italian network. For a lot of them, they see themselves simply as American of Italian roots, and there's no desire at a wider scale to sort of get involved in Italian specific networks, at least in academia. So this is what we've seen. That's why there's no one size fits all approach. I want to mention that we are undergoing a survey analysis. So during the middle of COVID, my colleague and I launched a survey called The Dynamics of Global Mobility, and our main stakeholders in this were the diaspora networks themselves. So I think if we keep in touch, please subscribe to our emails and see what we're sharing in the next 6 months or 12 months. We really hope to share some insights about how the diaspora members think their home countries and their sort of new host countries can support them, as well as the EU. I mentioned before those quarterly meetings with the Diaspora Network. Since then, we've gotten a good relationship with all of them. And I think we've returned now to the format of having an annual meeting only, while occasionally being in touch on a bilateral basis. The challenges, again, are the limited time of these counterparts because they're pretty much all in volunteer roles. And of course, these days, it feels like, people don't simply work a 9 to 5, your phone's pinging and your email inbox is growing at all hours of the day. So really, we do find that we have to rely on ourselves and then provide as much of a space as possible for them to just make it easy as possible and reduce friction. To actually counter Charlotte's example, we have found a small number of embassies and countries that want us to do the heavy lifting for them. And I think this is where, again, we trade stories. So I understand some countries really don't want us to be involved at all because they want full control. And I have no judgment about if that's good or bad. But I have an example. The Belgian science counselor in the US said, we're really limited in our resources right now. I have many portfolios, not just science or research. how about you, with our support and with our endorsement, you were to run a small network online, and then from there we can sort of join forces and see. So this is an ongoing dialogue we have. We haven't started it, but I really underscore this just to say that we can't take one approach and assume that even for a neighboring country or countries of similar size or income or diaspora demographics, that would necessarily be the same. However, to give examples of neighboring countries, the Netherlands actually has a diaspora network, but it's for Dutch academics only. And this is something that I think I came in, and a challenge to me was I assumed that it was like a lot of other networks where they're open to everyone, an American or Canadian or a third country national who wants to perhaps find an opportunity in that country, might not speak Dutch, but is passionate about the Netherlands. In the case of Spain, they hold a lot of their events in Spanish, but they open their doors to anyone. And they obviously do a lot in English as well. So they say the more the merrier. They encourage us to post on not the extranet, but our events portal. So we share widely all the Spanish activities. In the case of the Netherlands, I was actually gently reminded that it's really just for Dutch academics who are currently posted to the US, whether it's short term or long term. So that's, again, why I say there's a whole spectrum in size, formality, structure, and that's why it's also a bit time consuming to really go case by case. So I've shared in the chat, as I start to wrap up here, links to our current edition of the annual meeting, which is tomorrow. So I'm really happy to join you during this time where everything in our mind is about the annual meeting. This is in person only, so we've sort of returned to the deep networking roots that it was before COVID. We have a photo album of last year's edition, which you can find again in that link in the chat, and then just click the link to the photo album. And then we did the 2022 edition in a hybrid format, and 2021, 2020 were also virtual only. So please go through, feel free to sort of see what the content was there. We always have embassies and diaspora networks, among others, including US government, share their perspectives. I just have a picture here of the EU Science Counselor to the US giving the keynote speech at last year's event. He'll be giving introductory remarks tomorrow. So again, if you have any curiosity or any ways that you think you can share content with us, or we can highlight your country or what your portal is doing, we're really happy to do that. I'm going to leave you with a slide here. This is one of the ways I end my presentations. For example, when I go to universities, I tell the people in attendance, whether they're faculty or they're PhDs or postdocs, connect with your researcher diaspora networks. Of course, I'm always pointing to EU resources, national portals, but I say this is a semi-official or completely unofficial source that really wants to help you. And I give the example of the Swedes on the more informal side, of the Spaniards on the more formal side. So really, we can always expand and adapt this to also include things that for EURAXESS Europe are useful. But I show this just to give an example of how the diaspora networks are so weaved into what we do. I also have compiled some country-specific slides. So when I have a registration page for an in-person event, I always say, hey, what countries are you interested in? Please ask your attendees, your registrants. And then people inevitably say the usual suspects: Spain, Italy, UK. So I just give them a 10-second slide where I say, firstly, check out EURAXESS Spain, because we're maybe generalists for you, but when you want to go to Spain, we have EURAXESS colleagues that really are there to provide country-specific expertise. We mentioned the science counselors, which is the term, at least in EURAXESS Worldwide, we use for those diplomats from European countries who are tasked with R&I, STI, research portfolio, or diaspora portfolios. So in this case, we maintain a strong relationship with those diplomats, just like with the diaspora networks. So I give an example here also of how every country is a bit different. You'll see some, for example, in the case of the French, they use their consular network to engage in science diplomacy and outreach. Most other countries really just use their consulates for visas and passports, and they don't do much public diplomacy. So whenever we travel to a new city, one of the first things we ask ourselves is, can we partner with the French diplomats there? And oftentimes they will say, even if they can't meet with us or speak at a university we're going to, they say, let us make an introduction for you. So I give that also just as to shine some light on how we're able to spread a bit further. There's a lot of universities that have US offices or Canadian offices as well. So in the case of the Germans, they're very successful, and they work hand in hand with their diaspora networks as well. So these slides, I will share these afterwards, so you can go through some and get a sense of how we advertise specific countries when we're asked to. We promote the events of these diaspora networks and of these embassies and cultural centers. But I will close off here. Thank you for sharing some time with me today. This email address comes to my colleague Daria and me alike. Again, we're a two-person team based in Washington, covering all of the United States and Canada. Canada, just by being about 10 or 15% of the population of the US, it doesn't have the same numbers of diaspora networks or members that we have in the US, and we're based here in Washington, so we have a more gravitational pull towards the US, but we work on both countries. So I would say let's be in touch. Please follow us on all the social media channels. Click the link in the chat or just scan that QR code with your smartphone and you'll start getting our emails. And of course, our doors are open if you want to suggest to us any content that we can share with our 9,000 strong audience of Europeans, North Americans, and other researchers based in our countries. So thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing from my next colleague.
Thank you, Jackson. Thank you for your valuable contribution. Let us now move to China. Let me introduce Kārlis Rokpelnis, who's a representative of EURAXESS China. So Kārlis, you have the stage.
Thank you so much. And also from me, a big thank you for organizing this event and being able to meet everyone and give a little bit of a taste of what we've got down here. So good evening from Beijing. A lot will be quite repeated from what you've just heard from my two colleagues, but also quite a bit of difference. So as anyone else in EURAXESS Worldwide here in China, it is there are two directions. We're working both with the diaspora and of course we're working with the Chinese researchers at all research career stages to attract them to go to Europe. And with China, there are two major things to consider and keep in mind as a background. For the first one, the flow of researchers, right? The human kind of mobility out of China towards Europe has been historically and still is much bigger than Europeans coming to China. And China is in many ways has become a research heavyweight, and so that's now a problem, is that we're at a European level we have not enough of the diaspora here. And then of course the other thing to consider is sort of the geopolitics of European Chinese relations, and within that science diplomacy and sort of what kind of scientists and what kind of science we want to be bringing in each direction. And that is both a EU concern and also at national level. Now, as I said, the number of Europeans coming here is much smaller than Chinese researchers going to Europe. Those who do come here, they are attracted by a variety of reasons. A lot of them are here because there are some universities here that are truly cutting edge, and this is the best place in the world to do their research. There are some people who are here for personal reasons, for family reasons, interest in China, interest in Chinese culture, or some other aspect that has brought them here. China it's far from home. Chinese universities, most of them have seen very rapid progress in their capacities in terms of both scientific research, but also as sort of heavyweights of fostering new ideas, creating innovation. And to some extent, they have at the same time tried to push internationalization and bringing in people, but they've also oftentimes lagged in actually providing sort of the equivalent of what everybody at EURAXESS does, right? This helping people move. And so most European researchers who come here end up being challenged by sort of the daily life, but also things to do with essentially how things work legally. The same questions that anyone is probably asking anyone at EURAXESS anywhere about visas, social security, and so on and so forth. And of course, EURAXESS Worldwide does not provide this kind of service about in a location outside of Europe. But however, the community of these researchers is the best resource for this kind of matters, because what happens is that in a lot of these researchers are one of very few foreign researchers in an institution which might have 20,000 staff members, right? And then and within the institution, you don't necessarily have the expertise on things like, again, just the same example of Social Security for a foreigner. And so the best way to be effective at this is to ask someone who has this experience, and that might be a researcher from another country or from your own country in Europe, who has been here for a while. And that is why researchers do end up seeking out others in a way which I probably will. I mean, I don't have a way to measure this, but I assume at a higher extent than that happens in places like North America or in LATAM. People are interested in connecting with their countrymen. People are also interested in connecting with people who are doing the same research here in China, but have this kind of face the same challenges as foreign researchers here. And that's why I do think we actually stand in a pretty special position within EURAXESS Worldwide hubs, where we do have a very strong pull as EURAXESS, specifically as a EURAXESS brand, and the community around it. We do have a series of events that happen every year. Of course, COVID and all kinds of things have happened, and so some of it has been disrupted. And of course, there's evolution of how things work. But you will see a pattern of a very big EU delegation-led event where we actually fly researchers from all over China together to meet in person for a 2-day event. And then the researcher forum also is an opportunity for the national embassies to organize events on the side. So they fly to Beijing to meet with the delegation. The ambassador comes in, and then on the side, the day after or the day before, they get to, if the embassy is interested in doing that, they do either thematic events or just social things for their own diaspora groups. So there's a social element that some of it is very long-standing. So me personally, I have lived here in China for about 15 years, and I have been participating in EURAXESS events for about a decade. And there are people whom I have been who I'm connected to exclusively through the community that EURAXESS has built, and for which I'm very, very grateful. Now, we try to provide essentially skills training that allows integration of both Chinese and foreign researchers, and that allows, again, build community, enable people to be successful as researchers, and for the diaspora, what brings in the most interest is this ability and advice or sharing of skills and ideas for essentially succeeding here. And so, among other things, we have a group that's dedicated to exchanging ideas and applying for Chinese funding, right? So people that's not something that I would drive in any way, but it's just, that is something that people really value, because it is very hard to as the only foreigner in a university, oftentimes it's very hard to really learn more about things outside your immediate workplace, and that is something that people need to be successful. And as a result, I do believe that we have a very strong and good connection to the diaspora. Now, the diaspora groups that are active here, the much already repeatedly mentioned Spanish network is very, very strong, and it is due to the support that they're receiving everywhere in the world. I understand that, in fact, the national diaspora networks are then connected in an international global level, and that really strengthens them. The Italians also have a very strong group here. The French do too. The German network is very interesting in that because DAAD has a very strong presence and several German research institutions have strong representative offices here, there is a lot of German sort of activities, German language content, but there isn't the German community, the German researcher group is something that was actually fostered by my previous colleagues here. And so we've really done a lot to build it up. We also have thematic networks that are, again, something that EURAXESS has really fostered and maintained. And those are dedicated to humanities. There's an engineering group, and then there's a biosciences group. There's also a network for Europeans doing their PhD work here in China, and that includes people who are here for their entire degree or those who come here for a shorter period of time on secondments during their research time, their PhD research period, and those are there to really exchange amongst themselves and do what they do best, which is support each other. And we try to provide them with space, with opportunities to meet in person. The delegation, when there is a budget available, has put out funding for specifically events for people to meet and discuss in the thematic groups. And then finally, as Jackson mentioned, this sort of us looking for content from national hubs, from EURAXESS or national funding agencies, and trying to reach people. So one of the things that I've done is to create dedicated newsletter flash notes to country networks, and that's in some cases it's people who are citizens of a country, and sometimes it's both citizens and Chinese citizens who have experience in a specific country. So, for example, I've done a mailing about specifically research funding opportunities in Hungary. UKRI and we put together a newsletter for the UK cohort here to remind them that UK is back in horizon and there are all kinds of opportunities there. So we try to really provide these this targeted information to stay relevant and to deliver messages that perhaps, I mean, some of these things can be very, very specific, like the Danish Foreign Ministry is looking to recruit a few scientists, people with academic background to become diplomats. That's very interesting for a very, very small group, right? And we that is something that I have specifically used our database to reach those people. And that is very clear that if you have let's say the Spanish embassy or the French or the Italians, with a strong science focused diplomacy work structure in place, and of course a much bigger diaspora in place here too, they will be definitely much less reliant on our services. Whereas if you're looking at some of the smaller embassies here in Beijing, which every single European Union country is present here, but many of them are very small, and the people who are responsible for science and technology, that is a small part of their portfolios, and so we try to take on a little bit of that work and to promote opportunities from the countries that do not have that capacity in their embassies here, through communications, through mailing to specific people, to highlighting that their opportunities amongst the other, so that it's not just that every single PhD is every single PhD opportunity in Europe is in Germany or in France. So we are happy to work and do what we can to both reach your diasporas here in Beijing, to identify them. It sometimes might be one person, but that person might have been here for 20 years and really knows what they're doing. And so please reach out to me through many of the social media accounts that you can see here. And if you are ever in need of reaching anyone on the other side of the Chinese firewall, which is, of course, something that is a very objectively a condition here. Sometimes it's hard to reach people in China because they are living in a little bit of a different social media system. That's something we can do through. We can also do that through our accounts on WeChat and on Weibo. So we're here to help you reach people. And that's it from me for now. I look forward to questions.